Right, we're now live on YouTube.
I think we all have to unmute ourselves, don't we?
Yeah, I can only mute you.
Okay.
What is
Everyone?
the YouTube connection?
It's on your Facebook link.
Oh, you've put it up there, have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay then, folks, let's, I think we're about ready to start the meeting then, if we're not expecting anyone else. Thank you, everybody. So obviously, extraordinary meeting tonight, so let's try and make this crisp. Especially item 3 was the reason for us convening, and we need to do that some justice tonight. And I've noted that whatever when we get to item 3, we'll decide how to address it, but there's some 25 plus questions, each with subsections, so we do need to address that.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
We've got 2 members of the public sitting in the waiting room. Shall I admit them now?
Yes, please do. Great.
Okay, that's everyone.
Good evening. We have Charlie Scott. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. And David Hall. Great. All right, thank you very much for joining. Right, we'll move to item 1 on the agenda. Apologies and declarations of interest. If I can just take apologies first, please, Anita. Anita, you're on mute. Oh dear, I think you're going to be reading this all over again. Anita, you're on mute.
No, apologies have come in from David Rushton.
Okay. Thank you very much. Claire.
I am going to declare an interest in the planning application 6 Chaseview Road, just the sheer fact that he's a neighbour.
Okay, thank you very much. Great, thank you. Okay, item 2, planning matters and application. So we're having this meeting tonight, and I think we resolved at the last meeting that the pending application for Boughton Lodge, that we'd discuss that in outline. And we have with us Charlie and Flora, who can give us an outline of that. Now, we won't be making a decision on this tonight for a number of reasons. However, I would like to invite, obviously, Charlie and Flora to outline that, and also invite councillors, if they have any questions around that application, to ask them. This may or may not come to us actually for formal consideration. We don't yet have that kind of formal alert as yet. It's somewhere slightly in limbo, and for a number of procedural reasons, we won't be tonight making any decisions on this or recommendations. However, Charlie and Flora, thank you for your time. If you would like just to give us all the councillors an outline of what you're looking to do, and then I'll invite councillors to raise a hand and ask any questions.
Hi there, thank you, Nick, and hello everyone, and thank you for your time and energy, not just tonight, but I guess generally in looking at this. I think maybe we saw, Nick, thank you, and Mark for coming up to the site last week to have a nose around, but I guess that maybe, Charlie, why don't you talk about why we want to live there, and then I can tell you about maybe what it is that we're trying to do and why we think it's worth a consideration.
Yes, so again, thank you for allowing us to come and speak to you this evening. We have moved recently into the area and are now renting a house off of the Boughton estate in Weekley. And the move has been a long time in the planning, as it were. We've been living in London, but have moved out to the area having previously lived here before and with my own family's connection at Boughton with the area, we are really looking to settle down roots, and with consultation with my brother, who's moved up to Scotland and will be spending most of his time in Scotland, I will be starting to take on over the next few years a more active role in the Boughton estate, in engagement with the local communities that surround the Boughton estate, and we are looking for a place to set up our own roots, our own family roots, which are at the same time slightly separate from the estate. A bit of our back history, I'm not sure whether Nick has gone into any of that back history, but we lived, I think, just after we were married, we lived in Newton for 6 months, and we were married in Geddington in, well, nearly 4 years ago. In a few weeks' time, it'll be 4 years, but married in Geddington, and we have had both our 2 little boys christened at Geddington as well, albeit with 3 separate vicars, our wedding and the 2 christenings. It's just been rather a shame not to be able to see Gillian in person since we've moved out, in March.
But basically, we love it here. We love the area. We've been kind of thinking about it for almost a decade, really, and it's kind of been a really long time coming. Charlie's dad and brother are really keen that he gets really stuck in on at the estate, and I think he's got some really cool ideas for just involving the community a lot more in what goes on there, and using the land a little bit more sort of socially minded, which hopefully you'll get wind of in the next year or so, but that's kind of coming down the pipe. And so we've been looking for somewhere to live for probably about 4 years now, maybe 5 since we were engaged, and really struggling to find somewhere that was in really good proximity of the estate, and that we thought was kind of the right living and gardening that we were after, as it were. We're renting this house called Cedar Lodge in Wheatley, which is on the estate, which just is wonderful, being able to walk onto it, for Charlie to go and talk to people and jump on his bike and go around everywhere, not have to drive too much. And I guess my biggest thing is that I would love to live somewhere that is big enough for a growing family, that we can have people to come and stay in, but nothing too exciting. But what we really want to do is to kind of live quite sustainably. So the plans for this house include ground source heat pumps and solar panels. We'd like to try and generate as much of our own energy and electricity, including running cars, from our own plot. And for me, the gardening and biodiversity and ecological aspect is really exciting. I would like, we put in a proper walled garden in the plans, because trying to be as productive as possible is something that's really important to us. And then the wider biodiversity and restoring and planting new hedgerows and trees, wildflower meadows, eventually having bees. It sounds a bit what's the word? The good life.
Yeah.
But I think we've thought about it enough and talked and consulted with enough of the right people, that we feel that what we've put planning in for has that right balance, that we'll be able to maintain and look after it, and also make sure that we contribute a lot more to the site than is currently there. This is really about sort of net gain, and about trying to sort of build upon the estate's legacy of building nice quality, local, sustainable houses. What's up there at the moment is a bit of a mess, to be honest. And anyone, please, you're very welcome to come and have a nose anytime. It's lots of old outbuildings and like really poor quality sort of corrugated iron stuff. So we're trying to pull that all together and make a house that's smaller than the existing footprint in terms of area, but quite a lot bigger than the house that's there at the moment, in order to fit in all the living requirements that we wanted. But we are so open to conversation and questions, and as I say, if anyone wants to come and have a look anytime, we are around the corner, so let us know everything you're thinking.
Yes.
Right. Well, look, thank you very much for that very succinct, but I think quite useful introduction. So thank you for that. So I'm going to just invite councillors, if you just put your hand up with any questions for Charlie and Flora. Mark, followed by Peter.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a question for the applicants, it's a statement more. what's been implied offline, I'd just like to make it clear that I have not been involved in any pre-planning in this application. The only advice I gave to Charlie on the conversations I had on talking about other things was to speak to the parish councils and come and present to the parish councils. The invite that Nick and myself went on was sent to the parish clerk to be sent to all councillors, but it unfortunately wasn't sent out to everybody, which explains the surprise of me and Nick when no one else turned up. The application, when we spoke about it last time, was posted with Borough Council. It just hadn't appeared on the search screens. And as of this afternoon, the application is showing on the search, although for some reason it's not working at the moment. The application number is KET/2020/0541. So it is in the system. It was in the system when we decided to have this meeting at the last meeting. It just hasn't appeared. That's why the plans, Charlie kindly provided all the plans for us so that we got pre-notice before any decision date. That said, the boundary between Geddington and Walkton literally goes through, well, I had a look this morning, it goes through the existing building. Mostly it's in Walkton, so I don't know, I presume it's going to go to Walkton Parish Council, who were also at the meeting, and that was purely so we could get a feel for the application, for where it's at, how it was going to be seen, where the new building was going to be, etc. Not really discussing in depth too much about the application itself in terms of merits. So that's just wanted to make that clear, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you. Peter, you were next,
Okay,
followed by John.
since it doesn't feature on the site, but apparently it is live on the site, when is the expiry date for consultation?
I don't know. I don't know who's got it.
We didn't know.
I should also point out Walkton Parish Council don't have a clerk at the moment, and they're down 2 parish councillors. So at the moment they're in a bit of flux as to what's going on and getting information.
It's a 13-week application, Peter.
Okay.
We actually submitted a pre-application for advice in June, which we received very little feedback from Kettering Borough Council on. In fact, the day that 8-week period was up, we received their feedback saying maybe it was a bit big, which is what Historic England, we got a separate report from Historic England, which is also in the pack. But we felt our planning consultant felt they hadn't really looked at it properly. At that stage, they said, Kettering said, we have a design surgery next week and therefore we need your application in today, which also came as a bit of a surprise. So our architect and planning consultant got it in the wee hours of the morning. And that was about 4 weeks ago now. So we're not sure, we haven't heard much back from Kettering Borough Council since then. We're not sure if the 13-week process starts then or now. My suspicions perhaps now. But because of the size of the site itself, it's a 13-week process.
Thanks very much for explaining that. Certainly the 13 weeks is very, very valid, because it means that the normal 9 weeks is not going to be quite the same level of issue. I'm sure Mark, since we've flagged it back to him that it doesn't feature on KBC's site, I'm sure he'll be looking into that. And if we are to be a consultee as a parish council, then I'm sure we'll get the 13 weeks from when we're actually notified that we're live.
Yes.
I've looked personally at the whole Dropbox full of information, and very impressive in its depth and its thoroughness. One specific thing, it is being proposed essentially as a replacement for the existing property that's on the site. That's how it addresses the issue about building in the countryside. Is the current property inhabited or not?
It was last inhabited about 2 years ago, we think. It's not in a great state. I think the guy who was there had been there a while, and had smoked heavily in it for quite a long time. There aren't any foundations. There's a lot of quite scary cracks in the walls. We thought really seriously about keeping it and extending it, as it were. And we had surveyors out to have a look at it, and the cost of underpinning it and digging out foundations and replacing the roof and the chimneys for something that isn't of great architectural merit sadly completely outweighed keeping it if we were going to extend it. So that was kind of how we came to the conclusion to take it down if we can.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you,
That's all,
Peter.
Nick, from me, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. John.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've looked at the details, and it looks a beautiful house. I'm really impressed by some of the ecological details that you've obviously thought about very carefully, which is lovely. How far off the road is it? I was trying to explain to somebody how far off it was. I couldn't quite work out. Is it about half a mile or something like that?
It's probably about half a mile, maybe slightly more, going up the track. So when you're looking at it from the road, the access road up, you go up the track to the top of the hill, and then it's probably about, I'd say, 300 meters or so.
Okay, that's great. How would it be visible? I suppose it wouldn't half a mile down the road.
The current house isn't visible at all.
Right.
And the positioning of this house is slightly different. It comes forward about 10 feet.
Okay.
The visual impact surveys we have done don't think it will be visible. It may be that in the depths of winter you catch a glimpse of it going down the road.
Yeah.
But you'd really have to be looking for it, and the hedgerows and meadows and things that we want to plant will soften that, and we'll be planting more trees as well. So if anything, it should be
I think
less.
I think I've both driven and cycled down the road just to try and spot it, the current house myself, and I think unless you were in a high tractor or HGV, there would be very little chance of seeing it.
It's a good point on the HGV notice. One thing we thought about when we met Mark and Nick last week was access for vehicles in construction, because we don't want them having to be directed through Geddington or Grafton, really, for that matter either. So we're talking to the estate manager at the moment about granting access from the main road through the estate for any really.
That's interesting. Yeah. Thank
So
you.
we'll forward that. Nick, we'll send you that email confirmation as soon as we've got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and anything you send, I'll circulate. So thank you for that. John, anything more before I move
No,
to Sue?
that's fine. That's fine. No, thank you very much. Yeah, cheers.
Thank you. Sue.
Yes, it says in one of the paragraphs, a key and unique requirement of this house is that it should be part of the continuing expansion of the Boughton estate. Does that mean that there are going to be more houses or applications to build more houses of this side on the estate?
No, so this is very much our own project. I think the phrase of that was supposed to, amongst the historic context of Boughton building houses in the historic context. There are no plans at Boughton to build any other houses in the open countryside of this type.
It's a really good question. I would have asked that as well completely. It's a really great question. I think what we're trying to kind of say is the one-off thing here is that my father-in-law won't like this, but Boughton for a really long time has kind of been it's run so well by itself that the guys up in Scotland have just sort of let it tick along by itself, and it's done really well. And actually what Charlie's saying is, guys, you've got so much opportunity here. You've got 11,000 acres. Let's do something, let's really look at how we diversify it. But I've got to live somewhere. And we looked at things like even trying to carve out a house at Boughton itself, and Historic England actually came back and were like, don't even think about it. It's too important. You know, you would just destroy it if you tried to make, you know, living accommodation there. So this really would be a serious one-off in terms of building a house of considerable size for family use. And I mean, I hope our boys, one of them might want to live there one day, but it'll very much be tied to the estate, and absolutely no future plans to build anything of that size for the near to medium future, as far as we know, certainly.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Okay. Does any other councillor have any questions regarding this? Okay, thank you very much. So, Charlie and Flora, thank you for coming along this evening. And if there's anything you just want to say in close, and we'll get on with the rest of our business. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. It's entirely up to you. But you may want to get out while the going's good.
Thank you so much for your
yes,
time.
I think just thank you very much for your time, and
we're really looking forward to being part of your community if you'll let us. We love it here.
I would actually say, when depending on what happens with you being given notice, for those who didn't come up to the site last week, if you would like to come up to the site, we are around and would be happy to arrange a time to show you around in person. So
yeah, we'd love to do that. It really kind of brings it alive a bit, seeing it all. So yeah, we'd love that.
No, that's appreciated. And I think what we'll do is, of course, is I think again procedurally we'll circulate that, and then we'll decide if that's necessary, a delegation or an opportunity for everybody. But thank you for that.
We'll let you get on.
Perfect. Thank
See
you very much.
Soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay. Does anybody have anything to say on that before we move to the actual application, the next one? John.
Yeah, I've circulated some information that I sought from the planning committee. I haven't, from the planning officers. I haven't circulated to everybody. I circulated to Nick, to Peter, and to Mark, and to Claire, because I was concerned about some of the ways that this was being handled, and I'm still not happy about the way that it's been handled. I certainly didn't want to say this in front of the applicants, because I don't like it could have put the applicants in a very difficult position. I didn't want to do that. But I learned that when this came to another parish council, a site visit was proposed. Now, my understanding is that site visits should not take place, and so I sought advice from the planning officers, and they've confirmed that site visits should not take place, because they're effectively a parish council meeting, and the public should be aware of them. And I think particularly with respect to our dealings with this family, it's not fair to the family, for goodness sake, that we are very transparent about our dealings with it. I have pointed out before that if we have meetings with the estate, there should be at least 2 parish councillors there. Okay, so Nick and Mark were there, but that still doesn't get over the fact that site visits should not be taken place. And I mean, I would have thought Mark would know this, having sat on planning.
Okay, John. I've got a few points on it, but let's just give Mark an option.
Yeah, there were 4 parish councillors there. It wasn't a pre-app, as the message that came back from KBC. As I said before, it wasn't a pre-app. It's a full app. We only agreed at Walkton because we knew the application had gone into the council, and Walkton Parish Council only meet every 3 months. So they wanted to make sure that they'd seen it. They also wanted to see the site, to see that its impact on the area, which you can't tell from a map. So that's why certainly I went with my other 2 colleagues from Walkton Parish Council, so that we could see what environmental impact it was going to have on the property, which we couldn't have done without a site visit. And we couldn't get a site visit without the applicants on site, because the gate's locked. Also should point out that the applicant isn't Boughton House. It is Charlie and Flora personally. It's not, they're buying it from the estate. So yes, I do know better. Yes, normally we wouldn't do a site visit, but we have done site visits before. We've done a site visit, for example, for the Stamford Road development with residents, one of which is on the on here now. So we, in exceptional circumstances, we do it. This one, we did it purely because from a map, we couldn't see what the impact was going to be. And that's why we did the visit. And I'm sorry that you weren't all invited. I did forward it forward that we'd have everybody to be invited. Just unfortunate that you weren't, which was nothing to do with me.
Okay, and I'll answer just a couple of those points as well, John. I think the first point I'm going to make is that I'm sorry that if you're not happy about things, I think the only thing I can say is that, yeah, maybe I'm still a little bit green, maybe procedurally some things were followed, but I don't think anybody had anything other than positive intentions. I don't think the applicant certainly didn't. I mean, they're just
I'm not
trying to be
saying
nice.
that at all. I'm not saying that at all. It's more about perception. That's what I'm concerned about.
Okay, well, and we all are, and I as chair are probably need to be the most concerned. I echo what Mark said, which was it was just a breakdown of communication, and I honestly believed everybody had been invited. I was quite surprised that nobody was there. Okay, that will teach me to read email addressee lists properly. But again, it is perception. But then I suppose again, I look at it from a layman's perspective. What would residents expect of me or of this council? Would be to actually go along to these places, especially if you can't get there. As Mark said, and we kind of accept, it's behind a locked gate, up a track, round a corner, up another track. You can't see it from the road. I've been cycling a lot recently, can't see it even when you slow down and look for it. To turn it on its head, had none of us gone there and had a look, and it is again, it's connected with Boughton, what would our residents have thought? Either way, but the point is, I genuinely believed, and I think Mark genuinely believed, everybody had had the opportunity. The next question is that if we assume that this application formally reaches us, what do we do about a formal site visit? Do we just not do it? Do we extend the invitation? Do we get together and send a delegation? You've heard the applicants, they're happy for people to have a look. I don't think it's because they think they're special. I think they genuinely think it's because nobody can see it. And on every single other application we get, we can at least go and see the demised land. You can't do that in this case. So, and I'm happy very quickly to discuss that, but we must move on and what people think of that. Does anybody have a view on that if we're invited and other
I have a view.
Get an opportunity? Well, John, what is that? I think we know it, but say it.
Well,
please.
my view would be to seek the advice of the planning department. I think it's particularly because we are dealing with. I mean, I guess it would be so for any place. I don't think when some of us had a look at the site at Stamford Road, it was a formal site visit. This sounds as though it would be a more formal site visit, and I think we should consult planning officers on that and get their advice on it, because we need to be transparent. And I think particularly when we're dealing with the family, because it is about perception for me. Yeah, I know what people say about the parish council and the family. They think sometimes some people think that we are hand in glove. We are clearly not, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that any of us would be.
Okay, John, the point clearly made. Does anybody else have any thoughts or points on this, Peter?
Yeah, despite the response that John did get from KBC, I actually see there's often a great value in site visits, not necessarily consultation on site with the applicant, that can be a different matter, but a site visit to view something that probably cannot be seen under normal circumstances. So when Mark sorted out the sort of paperwork flow, and if we are identified as a consultee, when we then officially notified, then I certainly wouldn't have I wouldn't consider it that contentious that we had a site visit. I am particularly conscious of the fact that what John's making, but I see it from a slightly different view. I'm concerned that I would not like any of our actions to actually count against the applicant in what I see as a very important and a very significant and very attractive planning application. But because they have a different perception within the village, within the residents, then we have to be conscious of the fact that we are seen to be walking that very much that central line, and not to cause them any problems by us having an involvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Adrian, I'll get to you in a second. I'll just make the point that, I mean, I understand from a practical perspective what John said and Peter's alluded to, but at the same time, we need to treat every applicant the same, whether that's my neighbour, Mr. Carter, who wants to put an extension on, or Charlie and Flora, Lord and Lady. Everybody needs to be, we need to have the same policy. I do think that's very, very important. And if that emerges that we don't do these types of site visits, or there is some other mechanism, then fine, as long as it's consistent. That's my view anyway. Adrian, sorry.
No, you've just made the point. That's what I was exactly going to say. Perception works both ways, so we have to treat everybody the same, regardless of who they are or what their connection is. And you know, would we necessarily need a site visit for this? I don't know.
I clearly went on it. I think the the one thing that came out was the visibility from the road. Clearly, this is going to be a large property. And one of the things you just cannot glean from going on Google Maps or reading the application is the visibility and the effect from the road. And that's one of the things that it does. You could arguably see the rest of it. The other thing is, if people were minded, as would be a genuine concern, well, there's a building there, could that be knocked down? People could see in person the state of that building and form their own opinion. So, like I say, I don't think we're necessarily at odds over this. If it comes to us, we will discuss it and form an opinion on it. Like I said, it sounds like it's going to be, if we do receive an invitation to go and view, it seems that we're not in agreement on that. I've seen what the planning officer has said. I guess what I would look at is what's in the right interests of the residents and the applicant. Yeah. What might just slightly tip it is that residents, and I'm picking up your point, John, might say, oh, I see, so you didn't even bother going to have a look at this because it's Boughton, you just waved it through, did you? You can't win sometimes. Maybe if we get that invitation, it does cross us, we'll decide to send a delegation of at least 3 or not at all. I really don't mind, folks. So we better move on. Mark.
Yeah, Chair, to answer Peter's question about consultation, etc., I've emailed the head of planning to ask him what's happening with it and which parish council is going to be asked to comment.
Thank you. Well done.
Okay. Does anybody have anything more before we move to the next application? Okay, thank you, everybody. And I appreciate everyone being honest. That's what we're here for. So Claire, if I could just go to yourself then, Mr. Eyre, 6 Chaseview Road.
Yeah, okay. Well, this application is for my neighbour, so I do have a bit of knowledge about it. But it is, he has an existing garage. It is 9 by 4 meters. It's got a ridge height of 3.4 meters. It is actually lower than the property because there's a hill. It is further down the hill, and he needs to raise the ridge height all the way around, so the overall ridge height would be a further 930 mil higher. This is so that he can get bigger doors to fit a larger van inside. The property is higher than the neighbouring property that it's adjacent to, but they appear not to have any issues. I'm going to just show you the location. If I can do that. Which I can't. Hang on.
I've just switched it on.
Okay. Can you all see that?
It's coming up. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the road and the property, and then further down the garden, it is very close to the neighbouring property, and that's the existing garage setback. And what he's proposing to do actually is reuse the roof and timber clad sides at the height necessary. I can't see that it's going to have any real impact on anybody who doesn't propose to turn it into a flat or anything like that. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Can't see
Sorry,
if anybody wants to
Adrian.
speak. Adrian.
What did you say he was doing this for? What reason?
He's got a larger camper van he wants to keep.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah, hence doors need to be higher.
And you're one of his neighbours?
I live almost opposite, yeah.
Right. Okay.
But the adjacent property, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have any problem with the height of the garage being raised.
I can't see anybody waving or grimacing. Peter, sorry. On mute, sir.
Okay, unmuted. I certainly I find very interesting that Claire mentions, I don't know to what extent she's established that number 4 don't have any problems with it, because as she says, it is directly on their boundary. The difference in floor heights between the two sites is over a metre. It's already quite a tall structure, and if we compare it with the sort of things that would normally be allowed, anything on the boundary, normally a structure shouldn't be any more than 2.5 metres high. It's already 3.4 high, and they want to make it 4.3 high. So it would be a very, very large structure on their boundary.
I think that just counts as permitted development. That comes under the height of it. It's only whether you need planning permission or not.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's why they're in for planning permission, as you say. My view of it is that from the road, it will be quite a significant height. I mean, it is, as you saw in the previous plan, you can see straight down the driveway, and that's where the garage is. So it is quite a barn-like structure, and I don't know whether at 9 metres long, 4 metres wide, and 4.5 metres high, there could be a suggestion that that's getting rather close to being a work-from-home industrial unit, and it will certainly lend itself to that at some stage in the future.
Yeah, I think that's the danger, Peter, that he might want to park his caravan, his camper van in there now. Should he move, the danger is we don't know what would happen, and change of use might indicate another planning application, but you don't know what you don't know in these occasions, do you?
John, I think you'd indicated.
Yeah, could we have a look at that previous plan, please? The site. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's actually full length of the house setback. Next door has sheds along this side, right next to it, so that's probably why it doesn't affect him. I mean, I haven't I haven't been aware of anybody in the area that's got any real problem with it.
What's the date for the decision, Claire?
Tomorrow.
So we can't actually walk up there and have a look, can we?
Chair, I could share my Google Map view of it if that helps.
It
Although
would.
some-
It would, I think. So I think what we're zeroing towards is, well, what does the street scene look
Yeah.
like with everybody else's garage?
well, for
that
some
might
weird
inform us.
reason, Google Maps has blocked the first part up to Claire's house. You can't view it street, but you can see the structure from Wood Street. So I can share that if you want, so you can see it.
Yeah, we may not get the same effect, but yeah, thank you if you can.
I had the same problem, and it calls Bright Trees Chase View.
What have I done?
That is it. You can see in the
That's
distance
it there.
Yeah,
Yes.
Right.
Right.
that's it currently. Yeah,
Ah,
It's going to be
you're never
Yeah.
that high up when you. When
going to be
you're on
about
the
the height of the top of this oblong.
Huh.
So it'll be up there.
as high as an extension, I would say.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there, isn't it?
Claire, is that the last of the semis coming towards Wood Street? I know there's a new build detached on the end. Is this a garage in the?
No, this is another. There's a block of 3 houses just here on the corner. So, so you've got.
Oh, I see. Yeah, of course. Those
Yeah.
there.
That one
Yeah.
there.
It is there.
Right. Oh, I see. Right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
See, this is the property.
Hmm.
That's as close as I can get to their driveway.
So what this looks like again? Yeah, those next 2 houses to the right, Claire, they're actually lower down then.
Yes, yeah, by
Yeah.
probably by quite an amount. The house is actually much higher than the garage as well. It's about, I'm only guessing, I didn't go right in, about 2 to 3 foot higher, about a metre higher than the garage is. This house has got a very large step.
The fact that
Hmm.
land falls away towards the end of the road doesn't do that planning application any favours, really.
Mark's point about the problems in trying to do it on Google Street View, and I was trying for ages trying to get good, and I had to drive up there to have a look at it because you can't get Google Street View to show you what you need to see. But it does look quite, as I say, it's a very significant garage as it is, and I personally feel that the planners are going to have well, obviously they'll have their own view, but I think, irrespective of what we say, I think theirs will definitely be the deciding factor anyway.
Okay. I mean, does anybody have a strong view of support or object, or just no comment? I'm not getting that we have a particularly strong opinion either way, but we are noting that there might be some height issues and light, etc. John.
Yeah, I don't have a strong view, but I just pick up what Adrian said about what it might turn into in the future, and it is a fairly sizable change, certainly in height.
It's another
Yeah.
3 feet, isn't it? So just over 3 feet,
Yeah.
or 3 feet. What's exactly? Okay. Sue, Paul, any views on this?
Yeah, isn't it a bit late in the day if it's got to be back tomorrow for us to be objecting anyway, if we wanted to object?
No, I think we can send the return back tomorrow, Sue. It's a bit late if we wanted to go and do extra homework, but it's fine to send our comments back on the day.
I didn't actually realise where it was initially, but I will have to declare an interest in that, being the next door neighbours are actually related by marriage. So
That's fine, Paul. That's good. Okay, look, folks, does anybody want to make a proposal here? I'm not getting strong views either way. Claire, look, Claire, but just before we do that, is there anything you want to say in closing from your perspective?
I mean, to be honest, it's not even, you don't notice it at the garage as it is at present. It's not really visible because it's so far back on the property. It would only impact one neighbour with height. And there are some very large garages in the area as well, on the woodland. That's sort of how I see it, is that it's not really going to make any difference to anybody apart from the applicant.
Okay. So
Yeah, just one more thing. If it's for a motorhome, surely people would prefer it to be shut in a garage than stuck out on the drive or in the road.
That's a good point.
Who's safer?
it's a fair point. Okay, I'm going to throw it. Does somebody want to make a proposal?
Yeah, propose to accept.
Or propose no objection?
Yeah.
Sue, or is that what
Yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah.
Peter, you seconding that? Oh, you're on mute, Peter.
I thought you were asking me for a vote. I apologise, I was a little bit quick.
Okay, the proposal is no objection. Again, obviously the neighbour will be consulted on it, I'm sure, being right next door, and will be aware of it, and I'm sure able to articulate his or her objections to it. So the proposal is no objection by Sue, seconded by Peter. All
No,
those.
I didn't second it, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Peter. Apologies. Does anybody wish to second that proposal? Sorry.
I second it, but am I allowed to?
Yes, you are.
That's right then.
No.
Oh no.
No. Okay. I'll wait then.
Okay. So it doesn't look like you have a seconder for that. Do I have an dear? Do you have an alternative proposal then?
Candidly, I was going to not agree with the proposal that was going to be voted on, but since you haven't got a seconder, then that won't be voted on. Obviously, the logic would be that I would propose that we object to it, but I don't know whether that's it is my personal view, but I don't know whether it's the view of.
We just need to move forward, Peter, and if we object, we object. You're able to make that proposal.
Okay,
if you wish to. So Peter makes the proposal to object. Does he have a seconder? Oh my God! Right.
Can I suggest then no comments made?
Well, I'm going to propose no comment. Does anybody want to second that? John will second that. All those in favour of no comment.
Doesn't it sound like a chicken way out? But I'm with it all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's sit on the fence, eh?
Abstain? No, thank you. Against that proposal of no comment. So, thank you. Right. Okay. Well, let's move, please, to item 3, which was the main reason for calling the extraordinary meeting, which is the, and certainly had a bit of press as well, the white paper, Planning for the Future. So this is a white paper consultation, which apparently does invite local councils, residents, everybody to comment and come back. I think it's by October, actually. And it sets out the stall in, say, in an 84-page document with some nice pictures we were discussing earlier on, with although the preamble would suggest, when you start to read the document, that this is going to talk about large-scale development, then infill, and then the little man, it does seem to be largely dominated by the first, and of which, like I say, some opinions have already been circulated. So again, like with all of these things, it doesn't say specifically how it's going to work, but it does go into some detail. Who wishes to start off? As I said earlier on, if we're going to send a return for this, it is suggested, I don't think we necessarily have to follow it, but I'll stand corrected, some 25 plus questions, some with sub-questions. So all I would say is if we're going to answer in that format, we need to keep it brief, folks, and rattle through, or we may wish to send a more holistic response. Peter, then John.
Okay, as we got the notification that NCALC are having a working group on this, which meets on the, I think it was the 4th, sometime over the next couple of days. I wasn't, because of the way that documents came around, I wasn't aware that that had been set up. Interesting to hear what their feedback is. It is, as you've outlined, it is such a phenomenally long document. Personally, I would need I'd look for clarification on proposal 5, which is the one that has been getting the most press, and it's perhaps the most contentious, which is the aspect of 3 terms of land, either a growth area, a renewal area, or a protected area, because the thing that has been getting, certainly it caught my attention, and it's been given the most prominence in the press, is the fact that, and I quote, proposal 5, areas identified as growth areas would automatically be granted outline planning permission for the principle of development. That's been taken saying that they'd automatically get planning permission. While how I read it, it doesn't actually state that. It states that that's the same as going through the stage of looking for outline planning application. And it's saying you don't need to do that because the area has already been identified as a development area. But then it does say how you would then have to get detailed planning permission, which could be secured in one of 3 ways. It talks about a reformed reserved matters process for agreeing the issues which remain outstanding. Now, what the hell that is, I certainly don't know. Maybe Mark knows. You have a wave, you can answer them all in one go then. Or a local development order prepared by the local planning authority. So that sounds like the local planning authority have got to prepare something instead of the developers. Or then it talks about exceptionally large sites. So the area of concern within that document for me, and the one I'd be looking for clarification on, would be, does the presumption of planning permission only cover the outline planning permission stage, or does it mean that they would therefore need to go for detailed planning permission? Because I don't read it that way. Thank you.
Do you want me to answer about the reserve matters, Chair?
The reserve matters.
Peter mentioned and didn't know what it meant.
Yeah, if you could, yeah, please do, Mark, then we'll move to John.
For large developments, what they normally do is an outline planning application that says, for example, Hamwood Park is going to be 5,000 houses. And then basically you go back with reserve matters that clear up specific items. So the street layout, the houses in blocks. So if as the white paper suggests, is you put an outline application or an area is put down for development, it might be a big area like Hamwood Park. It might be, say, 1,000 houses. And then it will be split down so that smaller SMEs and smaller building companies can bid for the little plots from the developer to build. They would put in their reserve matter for their parcel of land. So they'll describe the housing, what housing, size of housing, as a full-blown, it's a planning application that we know. It's just called reserve matters because it's an outline. So for that, I kind of accept that if it's a designated area for housing, everyone's agreed, then why do an outline application when they've then got to do reserve matters? So that's kind of where they're trying to get to, I think, with that one.
Okay. Right, John, and then I've got an open question which might help us just drive this discussion and towards an end. John.
My point was around the questions. I mean, I've got to confess, I've read the gist of this. I haven't read it in huge amount of detail, but it seemed to me that the questions are a bit geared toward what the government want, rather than us expressing what our wants are, what our views are. So I'd suggest that we don't necessarily go systematically through those questions or laboriously through those questions, but have a more holistic response. That's one of the points. And the other one was sort of related to that last point. And because I wasn't clear, Mark may be able to help me on this. Will parish councils and local planning authorities still have the ability to object to individual planning applications? Because I'm not sure about. I'm not sure if it takes away that that power.
Chair, sorry, as I've read it, and I've been desperately trying to read it for the last 2 weeks and spent this afternoon going through it.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
My gist of it is that you still have the planning considerations will still go ahead. It's just to try and speed things up. So it looks like for major applications, and also simplify things for Mrs. Widget wanting to do an extension on a house, but it's beyond permitted development. So it's to try and speed things up. It's to get away from paper and documents to more online and more data driven in terms of how things are decided. So we'd have a set of rules. We won't have a set of policies that give guidelines that we have at the moment. So it might say you can only have red houses on that street. I'm just making it very simple, but simplistic, but it might be, the rules might be down to that level of colour of bricks, colour of windows, to make it as a simple indication.
Yeah, it does make a lot of importance of design guides and pre-approved designs and standard designs. So it does look very much as if you pull something out of from their rules, then it will automatically be accepted. It's got, as I say, it talks extensively about the design guides, that those design guides will be put together locally as part of local plans, neighbourhood plans, and obviously it does say how they've got to be put together much quicker, which brings me to a specific, again, for Mark, and I don't know if it's been put back to KBC about it, but it does talk about the amount of time that it takes for local plans to be put together at the moment, up to 7 years, it says. The site-specific plan that has already gone before Parliament, or before the Minister rather, for approval for Kettering, will that be the document that would still be our local plan that would have therefore some relevance even under the new regulations?
I don't know. It's one thing I noted in it is Plan 2 going to be enough for a local plan, because it's just been submitted. And to be honest, the plan had most of what's in the white paper was in Plan 2. So designated areas for housing, designated open spaces, all that lot was all there. So why it wouldn't be, my only reasoning would be, is because it was written before the white paper and therefore had to be rewritten. And that would be a whole shed load of work to redo that again. I'm just thinking of the Gypsy and Traveller report that had 99 identified areas for Gypsy and Traveller sites. And then once we went down to try and get those sorted out, the second people thought it was for a Gypsy Traveller site, suddenly their land was unavailable. When they thought it was for the council buying it to build houses, they were all for it. So I'm not sure how it would stand up, to be honest. It's one of the questions I've got to ask the head of planning.
I'll come to you in a second, John. I saw you indicated. I'll give you my rough outline reading of it. On this more contentious point of is decision making being taken away and kind of being pre-planned. My reading of it, and I will stand corrected, is that there will be, yes, the larger development sites will almost be pre-allocated, but that they will all be part of plans already consulted upon and agreed. And what it and again, I will stand corrected on it, they're going to try and get away from. If you go to our more recent example of the land off Stamford Road that we obviously discussed at length, that my reading of it is that kind of thing wouldn't crop up like this, because that we were discussing the principle of development and the actual development. Going forward, my interpretation, this white paper says you won't be expected to do that. The principle of development, you will have been consulted upon holistically, and that would have been contained. However, somebody can come along, and if that is one of the sites earmarks, similar to our local plan, then you will be. But I will stand corrected on that. I'll go to John and then Mark again.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. And one is sort of related to what you just said, Nick, because it looks to me from my reading of readings really, is that they're trying to involve this, they're talking about involving communities in commenting on the development of local plans at an early stage rather than at a later stage on individual planning applications, which sort of fits in with what you're saying, I think. Now, as an aspiration, that's brilliant, but actually, when you are discussing something at arm's length about areas, then people don't really engage in that very much at all. They'll engage when you're talking about local applications, particular applications, but it's really hard. I mean, it would be great if they were involved in discussion of more sort of conceptual or plans at a distance. But I'm not sure that people can do that very easily. So that's one point. Second point is about, they talk about beautiful and sustainable places, but in fact, some of the sustainability appraisals are being abolished, I understand, in this. So in fact, they're not going to be able to make biodiversity targets, and I think that's important. And the other point I wanted to raise was in terms of affordable housing, because it seems like from this that developers are going to be much more in control than local councils. And it could in fact mean that less affordable housing, we need affordable housing in Kettering, but it could mean that there's less affordable housing provided than we get currently, because developers have less obligations to provide affordable housing in Section 106s, from my reading. So the obligations and responsibilities are taken away, but they seem to be given more powers.
Okay, Mark.
I'll answer the last comment that John made first. The paper actually potentially makes it better for affordable housing and infrastructure, in that percentage. It does say at one point that any already agreed affordable housing figures that we have are to be kept. Ours is 30% in built-up areas, 40% in rural. And the good bit in the report is that the viability reports that developers have to do to justify why they're not giving so much infrastructure money and affordable housing, as in the Rockingham Road one we've just approved last week, that goes. So a developer can't come along and say, well, I'm building 40 houses. I'd love to give you, 12 of those as affordable housing, but the numbers don't stack up. So I'm only going to give you 6. They can't, if what's written in the white paper comes to effect, they can't do that anymore. They will have to give us the 12 houses and make the rest work. The fact that they're suggesting getting rid of 106 and going to a revised SIL model means that there'll be a pre-defined figure that they have to give. So I'm hoping it comes out. So if they're building 40 houses, they have to give 40 times this number, and that goes to infrastructure, which the report seems to suggest goes to local councils to decide how to sort that out. So for new schools, hospitals, roads, all that lot, that should make it better if it works. That is one of the big problems with 106 and SILs at the moment. Just for reference, KBC use 106 because Sills doesn't give us as much money. My other views on it, sorry, Peter, I'll shut up in a minute, is that the plan sitting on planning and being portfolio holder for planning now, since this white paper came out, I've taken it over. It is broken. It doesn't work very well. It's clunky. It was written in 1947, which was great, but it's been tweaked by every government since then, and it's just so overbearing and overwielding. You can argue the same case with two different case study references and get the answer you want. In terms of developments and being forced on us, Hamwood Park was forced on us by the government 15 years ago. We didn't have the choice. It was Prescott, wasn't it? He basically said, "There, I want 5,000 houses built in Kettering on the east. You can object if you want, but I'll get the appeal to say it's approved." So we had to approve it. So it's been happening for years. It just tidies it all up a bit. I think there's possibly some areas I don't like, but I haven't read it all to make a definitive statement on those yet.
Thank you, Mark. We better let Peter jump in.
Sorry, I may have been excitedly waving then. I do apologise. Couple of points. As Mark was saying, they do away with the community infrastructure levy in the section 106, and they replace them with a revised infrastructure levy that is based upon a fixed percentage of the uplift value of any individual property within a development. So that, great. I think that's a much more manageable way, because you don't need to negotiate a section 106 and see what a developer thinks he can afford. This would be at a fixed rate. But what concerns me, we were talking about affordable housing, something that seems to have been, I haven't seen any reference to this in anything from NCALC, but within this white paper, under section 5.4, delivering change, it says, today we are also publishing a consultation on four shorter term measures. This is a totally separate consultation. That document is called Changes to the Current Planning System. So it's not this white paper, it's a totally separate document. And within that, they are proposing temporarily lifting the small sites threshold below which developers do not need to meet to contribute to affordable housing, up to 40 to 50 houses. So any development under the revised act, so it's not this white paper, it's something they're bringing in parallel to it. Unless there's 40 or 50 houses on there, there will be no infrastructure levy that's required for providing affordable housing, which just, I mean, it's going against everything else they've been saying about the need for affordable housing. And obviously, within rural areas, as Mark said, at the moment we've got the 40% of a development site. So even the three little sites that we've got identified under the site-specific plan for Geddington, all of them would require an affordable housing component. But the changes to the current planning system paper that's going through that has a shorter cut-off time, that's only got consultation till the 1st of October. That is the one that says that they're going to put that ceiling up to 40 or 50 houses before you have to make any contribution for affordable housing.
Yeah, I picked up on that Peter. It's in my notes somewhere. Anita, can we try and get hold of this from NCALC, unless anybody
I'll send them an email tonight. I'll mark it as urgent.
I'll have a look. It's not an NCALC document, it's a government white paper.
It is, but I think what Peter's alluding, what I'm agreeing, is that NCALC should have steered us to it as they steered us towards this.
Exactly. That's the point I'm making. It's referenced. There is a link within this white paper under, as I say, section 5.4, delivering change, that's got the link to the separate consultation that I'm referring to. That's the one that cuts down on affordable housing contributions.
I'm conscious so far that 4 of us have dominated the discussion and 4 of us, or 5, haven't. Sue, Claire, Terry, Paul, Adrian, any views on this, however minor, or if you haven't read it, don't be embarrassed. I mean, it's a meaty old document, but any views on this, either what's been said or what you have picked up or read?
Well, no,
So-
I haven't read it, so I can't comment. I haven't read any of it.
Fair enough. Okay.
I read it, and I read it from both sides of the coin. I'm very in favour of speeding up planning, very in favour for obvious reason, because I jumped through no end of red tape and hoops. I was concerned that views would not be taken from the locality. However, the more I read and the more I researched on the internet, I was less concerned of that, because I still think that's going to be taken into account. So I'm quite ambivalent about it, to be fair. As I say, I read it as the developer that I'm supposedly currently am, and I read it as a councillor, and I'm quite ambivalent about it. If it speeds up the process, but it still allows for views to be taken, then I'm okay with it, to be fair.
Again, I don't know if it's just me. I've read it, but only once. It doesn't seem to talk much about the individual applicant and what their experience will be. So I'm slightly picking up on your point, Adrian. Again, I am one of those, as you all know, that need to declare the interest. And, you know, I will make the point. I also, as Mark's alluded, Adrian said, I can tell you now as an applicant, it's dreadful. It's clunky. It's the public sector at its worst, and it definitely needs a shake up, not because of me, but because of everybody else who lives around here who might want to put an extension up or enlarge their garage or whatever. So anything that speeds that up, and this promises to do it, templates, the same style of maps or plans or anything like that, can only help people who just want to develop their house, not as a full-scale developer of 50 houses, but they just want to improve their lot. That it seems to be saying the right things. And I think, like Adrian and others, the more I read it, the less concerned I've become that we won't be consulted upon. I mean, I'm slightly encouraged by this, you know, the local plans kind of, the length of time should shorten between these being upgraded, decided and implemented. So that 30 months or something, compared to the 7 years or something at the moment.
25
it is a bit
years.
right. So like I said, I'm happy to hear from any councillor, because it is important, and it has been in the press, and thank you, John, it has been flagged up on Facebook this afternoon. If we can point to something that effectively does say that we as a parish council, forget us as individuals or as the borough, but as parish council, if anyone can point to something that diminishes an important role that we have at the moment on behalf of residents, please point it out. And I'm not throwing a challenge down. I think it's a constructive way, because we do have to do that. I've not read it, but others may have read it better than I have.
Yeah, Terry's got his hand up to speak.
Oh, sorry, Terry. I do apologise. Please speak, Terry. Terry, did you wish to speak? We can't hear you.
His mic's on, he's not talking.
I think he makes a very good point.
Very, very succinct. Okay.
Anita, I've sent you that changes.
I'm sorry, I didn't get Adrian's comment there. Was the fact that I couldn't get a comment in a very good point on, is that what Adrian's saying? Because I was trying to speak. I think I might as well leave the meeting, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Not at all, Terry. Terry, what was your point? We want to hear it.
The point, the dichotomy, if you like, the problem is to speed up this planning. Obviously, it reduces the time for each of the stages to take place. If that happens, then the opportunities for councils such as ours to make any comments is going to be reduced, because our meetings take place once a month most of the year. So if you're going to speed things up, it means that either the councils won't have the time or opportunity to make observations, or that those meetings are going to have to be more frequent. That's it.
No, thank you, Terry. And it's a very good point. I mean, I didn't read any detail which says necessarily that the kind of developments we would be deciding with a 21-day window that would necessarily be reduced. And again, I'll stand corrected. What I read was that the large scale stuff, the 100, the 500 houses, they're the ones that could be sped up by the principle of development having been pre-decided. That was my reading of it. I didn't necessarily read that Mr. Batchelor, the applicant, is necessarily going to have a longer time or a shorter time for that to go to his parish council. I didn't necessarily read that, Adrian.
No, I think you're right, and that's on the basis that you may, or we may, as a parish council, indicate an area for growth in the future, and that's when a decision can be potentially taken out of our hands and agreed. But you wouldn't necessarily agree that certain houses in a certain area would be allowed extensions or new developments in that area or change of use. So I think you're absolutely right. It's the fact that significant areas we might designate as growth areas, and then higher powers say, yeah, fine, if you've already agreed that as growth, then we'll allow those 50 houses. That was the point that a lot of people have picked up on.
Yeah. Pete, John, rather.
I'm trying to actually look at it from the parish council's point of view, because that's obviously what we need to respond as. That's how we need to respond. And it sounds like what we're saying is that we would welcome some speeding up of the planning process. We would welcome ways to engage properly with local communities on local plans and perhaps improve on that. But we would have very serious concerns should, and we don't, because of I'm not sure how much detail there is there, but we would have serious concerns should our responsibility and our rights to comment on individual planning applications was taken away. I know that's not terribly specific, but maybe it's that sort of broad brush approach that we need to have.
Well, I, for one, I'm not unhappy with that, to make those kind of comments, John, because at the end of the day, the white paper is broadish brush anyway. It's not saying, well, we're saying this many days and that threshold and this. It is talking in more general terms and principles, some of which it just repeats over and over again. So I don't have a problem, and we do need to move towards what our feedback is, saying those types of things. And I think that's probably an opinion generally shared, which is, I'll take your point. We must look at this from a parish council that considers applications, not necessarily as representing residents who make applications, although I think we should still have an eye to that. When we consider these applications, they do come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and forms and formats, as we all know, as I know, as Claire knows. Some are done this way, some are done that way, some have got this, some have got that. There could be an application in a year or two's time for that land off Stamford Road, which has a completely different ecology report and a completely different environmental report. And I think if I read it correctly, what they're trying to move towards fairly quickly with this white paper is to standardize a lot of these things. So, and the white paper does keep making mention of these tomes of documents, which if you've read it, you've really done nothing else with your life. And as a result, you've not really absorbed it. And what I'm getting from everybody is, yeah, thanks, Mark, I'll come to you in a second, is we like a lot of the principles, it sounds good, but we must just say again, be explicit that we do object to any kind of removal of our kind of local discretionary powers. Mark.
Yeah, Anita, I've sent you that Planet Changes white paper document, so if you can distribute it to everybody, that'd be good.
Okay, yeah.
But taking on the point that Terry said, which is a good valid point actually, I'm all for speeding up the process, but what we shouldn't be doing is reducing the response time for residents and interested parties to actually give feedback. I can't think of any reason why we should be just giving residents 7 days to respond to a planning application.
Absolutely.
It speeds up in other areas, but not that. And also, I'm happy that we dragged the planning process into the 21st century by doing more online, but we've also got to remember not everybody's got a computer, not everybody is literate with a smartphone to be able to see where the applications are. And I quite like the notices on the lamppost, because when I'm walking around, I can see that an application's been put there, and then I can go and do a bit of digging. So we do need to bear in mind, certainly the older members of our population that may not be IT savvy or have computers, that they still need to be consulted as well.
No, that's a couple of good points there. Was it Adrian had a?
I was just going to pick up on Mark and I think it was Terry's point. It is a very good point that we don't really have long enough now for local residents to feedback. I, for one, didn't have long enough, and I'm more than happy when residents ask me questions to give that feedback. The historical upset for me has not been the time frame for residents to feedback. It's the fact that planning applications seem to disappear into council houses and literally disappear, get moved from desk to desk. And that's where it needs to be speeded up, not necessarily in the feedback from the residents. We don't have long enough on that part, but we have too long in the bureaucracy that it gets lost in. And that's where it needs to be speeded up.
I echo that point. And again, I apologise for the crudeness and making it just my own example. But again, with my own application, a point needed to be checked, and an email was sent back to me saying, well, the person's off next week, so it'll be several weeks before we get back to you. So again, I think if we're in our return, and we do need to get to this, we make that point very clearly that we completely support it going, on behalf for the applicant and everybody else, it goes through quicker, but we must not have any less time to consider it. Yeah. And in fact, the current 21-day window actually gives us volunteers a problem. That might actually be something they consider, saying, I don't know, it needs to be considered the next parish council meeting, which might be in a week, or it might be in 4 weeks. It's luck of the draw. John, then Peter.
I think that what you just said is a good point. What I wanted to sort of tie this into is unitary. Because at the moment, although we have sometimes some quarrels, some difficulties with planning at Kettering, not a lot of problems, but we're frustrated by the slowness. I don't know if Mark can help us on this, but if planning is taken to the unitary rather than to Kettering Borough, that's another more distant authority that's making decisions on a local area, and that troubles me.
Well, planning will be going to the unitary. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
People seem to think that Kettering Town Council is going to have all these powers that Kettering Borough Council. It ain't. It's going to be the same as us. It's going to be a Geddington Parish Council, but for Kettering Town.
So the process, there is a danger of streamlining a process that doesn't take fully account of local circumstances, local conditions and local communities. If, for example, with a unitary, you have councillors considering something who are very, very distant from those local communities. That really
you have that now, John. You have that now.
To an extent.
And you think Kettering's slow, you should see some of the other boroughs.
Oh, I'm sure. That wasn't meant to be a criticism of Kettering.
Oh no, there's plenty of things wrong with KBC's planning department. We haven't got enough time to discuss it though.
Okay. Sorry, I think it was Peter, and then we do need to move towards agreeing some comments on our feedback.
I think the point we're all in agreement with, and it is thrust of the document, that it's talking about it's the bureaucratic pre-work that the white paper is looking to cut down to standardize, to shorten, such that we can go from the state of somebody sees some land and would it be possible to build something on that land? Well, it's saying, well, if you've done the complete survey and you've already identified it as growth or renewal, then yes, go through, you've already covered that. So now go through a couple of the steps. I think all of us, again, are just concerned that we lose the local authority we have to influence buildings, designs, development within our own area. And that's been one of the main responses that council seems to have come up with at the moment. They're saying that this takes away our local powers. I don't know if it does, and that's why I say I am actually at a state of querying exactly what it's saying, because if you read the words, what it says, for example, in areas suitable for redevelopment, so in other words, renewal areas, they're the ones that are not growth areas. It's the second level. There would be a general presumption in favour of development, establishing legislation. Consent for development would be granted in one of three ways. And this is the one that concerns me. For pre-specified forms of development, such as the redevelopment of certain building types through a new permission route, which gives an automatic consent if the scheme meets design and other prior approval requirements. So it's saying, if you tick the boxes, you get automatic. It doesn't say anything about going out for consultation. It says the approval will be automatic. And that's what I think every councillor worth his salt is concerned about, that, well, it's taking away an opportunity for input and the local questioning of a development.
And,
so that's, yeah.
And sorry, I'm jumping in. And if we have a unitary and more officers are by this legislation given delegated powers, then at the moment I have some issues maybe with Kettering officers with delegated powers making decisions, but if I've got a Northants officer making decisions under delegated powers, I have much more problems. Maybe I shouldn't, but I have in my head a bigger problem.
So our first point, so would it be fair to say that we support the general thrust of I can't find the words, of making this more streamlined, of taking away delays, of having almost pre-approved areas where the principle of development is approved. We are, however, concerned, particularly, it's the middle one, isn't it, Peter? Is it called the growth or the
renewal?
The renewal, that's it. And that would probably cover, sorry, Peter, you're on mute again.
It is both growth and renewal, because growth would automatically be granted outline plan permission has already been created, and renewal, where it says that would automatically be approved if it's the design codes. So it is this question of, well, is there any interface there where we've got an opportunity of putting the brakes on?
So we can express our concern that, because as far as we're concerned, in our parlance, renewal would include that Stamford Road development. It would fit under the size of renewal, wouldn't it?
If that site was allocated, but it isn't allocated, so you'd argue that in this way people would actually save us from that site.
Okay.
I would pick up on Mark's point. I would argue that actually falls under the area of a protected area.
Yeah.
Number 3.
It is not identified for building, therefore by definition it's a protected area. It's a question of what hoops we have to leap through to get an area as a protected area. But from reading it, all that it says, it's only the protected areas where we seem to have, according to the white paper, an opportunity for input, because it says in areas where development is restricted, open brackets, protected areas, any development proposals would come forward as now through planning applications being made to the local authority. So it actually seems as though the protected areas are the only ones where there's the normal process, and the other two have already these shortcuts that if you tick these boxes, you're going to get it.
So are we going to ask in our return? Are we going to ask them to be very clear on this, that we literally don't? go, or are we expressing concern?
I think you know, we would be expressing our requirement for that to be maintained, the level of input from local councillors to be maintained. As I say, I earnestly believe that this is a well-intentioned thing to shortcut all the bureaucratic nightmare about these big developments and how long it takes, years to get something developed at that stage. And it's saying, well, if you've gone through a local plan, you've already identified that that you can use that, then you don't need to do that again. Just go through now the detail.
Yeah.
It's just a question of what steps there are to go through the detail. So I think that I would suggest our response should be, yes, the principle of cutting down bureaucratic delays in the early stages, wonderful, but it shouldn't be seen that there is any need for cutting out local involvement in detail applications.
And that would be in our return, wouldn't it? And I'm going to ask, I think it's probably best if we ask Anita to collate these points and probably circulate these for our kind of perusal and sign off.
Fine.
We've got until October. The point is, we set this meeting because it was a very important issue, and if we got started in a normal meeting, no other business would get transacted. I'm happy that we really break the back of it tonight, and we come through with our opinion and a number of statements and comments. But I don't have an issue if that then does a bit of a round robin and we sign it off in the September meeting in a couple of weeks' time. It might be more constructive. Let's go Sue, and then I think Peter again.
Yeah, on the NCALC update that we received, it actually says very succinctly about what everybody is talking about, which is the consultation makes it clear that removing local determination will have a detrimental effect on housing provision. So, and that's what we're saying, that's what we're worried about, aren't we? On the whole, that is going to have a real detrimental effect on the decisions that we're able to make. Well, it already clarifies that in the NCALC update.
Well, we are, because the best example I go back to again is Stamford Road. That may or may not have been, under the new or the old regime, earmarked or approved for development in principle. But what we came forward with our local knowledge was to say, look at this flooding. Look at this. You're probably not aware of this, but this is what happens. And you're probably not aware of these species of animals that live there. There's A, B, and C. And you're probably not aware of, when it comes to traffic, this is a particular issue, and there's this many near misses. But you're standing away from it and doing a traffic management plan wouldn't have picked up on that. So absolutely, and I think we need to be quite vehement, not bang on about it, but we need to be quite vehement of the benefits of always preserving a local consultation. I don't think we necessarily need to request more time. I think, again, my idea off the top of my own head was, look, the 21 days just doesn't work. There's got to be a middle ground somewhere. But I agree, Sue. I think we're all in agreement. Taking that away is to the detriment of ourselves as councils and of local residents. It shouldn't be.
I think we should go for a 6 week. 6 weeks seems better than 21 days. I suppose it's twice that, isn't it? But it is about, this seems to be about, if particularly in our instance, if we're going to a unitary, making things more central, we almost need, at the same time as things becoming more central, to make sure that there is sufficient emphasis placed on keeping localism.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Peter, I'll come to you in a second. I mean, and again, it makes more sense to me that a lot of things happen concurrently rather than consecutively. So that there's plenty of feedback that can be taken, an officer visiting, reports done, etc., all in tandem, as opposed to one, then the next, and the next, and the next. Sorry, Peter.
No. My point was sort of partly to do with Sue's point there. Back to what I said originally about NCALC, they've got their working group over the next couple of days. There will be an output on that. I don't know if the output certainly the output is sorry, the meeting is before our parish council meeting. I wouldn't think necessarily the output before our parish council meeting, but the output from that will certainly be before the end of the consultation period.
Yes.
So we would have an opportunity of seeing what a considered view of NCALC and other parish councillors, parish councils is. As I mentioned earlier, and Mark circulated it now, but as I say, the one about raising the ceiling, that's only got the 1st of October, so there's a much shorter time scale on that. The principle that it says here, where the local plans identified land for development, planning decisions should focus on resolving outstanding issues, not the principle of development. If that is the thrust of this document, then that's something that I think most businessmen, councillors, residents would support. It's saying if you've already made a decision that you can do some building on there, and that decision was brought about democratically, and there was lots of opportunity for input at the stage when that local plan was put together, it's pointless going back through that stage again to ask for outline planning permission. So I don't think anyone would have any concern about the logic of that. I think part of the problem with this, and without getting political about it, it's a bloody awful document. It starts with Boris's facetious opening comments, and it goes downhill from there. And it's such a wordy document when I think it's actually got laudable aims. Hobby horse.
Yeah. Anybody else have any more kind of comments to raise on this? So what are we looking to do? Are we going to ask Anita to summarize the points made, and we effectively turn that into a draft return, which we can punt around? Obviously, what we can't be doing offline is coming up with new ideas. It just has to be a validation of what we've said, or if something's been misquoted, or we've just not quite got enough meat on the bone, and that gets circulated around. And then effectively, are we saying that we might have some knowledge of what went on at the NCALC meeting on Friday, but not necessarily all the detailed notes? Are we in a position to sign off our return at the September Parish Council meeting? Or would councillors prefer we get the NCALC notes later in the month and do this in October? When is the deadline again?
29th of October.
Right.
So that's why I support the logic of, by all means, bring together the discussion we've had this evening, so that the immediacy of that's not lost, either by way of the minutes or pulling it into a draft document. Wait until we've got the feedback that we considered from NCALC, possibly discuss it further if it was necessary based upon that.
Yes.
If again, it may mean, because this sort of thing is always going to mess up any normal parish council meeting, it might need another meeting specifically on this again. But the logic would be, we've got till the 29th of October. We send our response in any earlier than the 29th, it won't get considered or given any credence, because they won't even start going through documents until then.
Okay.
So we've got time, let's use it.
Okay. And Anita, could we circulate then a list of the bullets of what councillors feel on this prior to the September meeting? And we might spend just 5 minutes at that September meeting having a refresh and just reviewing those bullets, but no more than that 5 minutes or 10 minutes, if that. We're not going to rehash the discussion again. And we would just almost discuss that like we would going through minutes and etc. And then that way we've pretty much got the record of what we feel. If anything happens, then we've got it. However, we then wait for the NCALC, any interpretations from that, and we could put final spit and polish on it at the October meeting, and then you've got a couple of weeks to do the return. Does that sound fair, everybody?
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll add this to the agenda then for the September meeting.
Yeah, it's to review the notes of this meeting. Again, we don't want to have the discussion all over again unless there is something that a couple of us have read it and found something glaring that we need to bring to the table, but I think that we should be concentrating on fleshing out our points and making them punchy
Okay.
in that document.
Chair, is there
Yes, John.
some, there's the other paper, isn't there, where there's a shorter deadline? Is that something I dread to say it, is that something that we should make some comments on?
It sounds like it is, but I don't know. Is this similar as a white paper, or is this a fait accompli that's just happening? What did we say on that? Forgive me.
If you look at the structure of after the meeting, Mark's arranged for
Right.
it to circulate it. So after the meeting, people can study it. The structure of it looks just the same as the structure of the white paper. It's got the same sort of blocks as it starts out, talking about the purpose of the document and who the consultees will be and what the timescales are and things like that. But it is just identified as changing to the planning policy or whatever the terminology was. Changes to the current planning system, as opposed to the white paper that's talking about a total a fundamental change to the whole structure.
Okay.
But that is the one that, as I say, we are in the structure of the document does say that they are looking for input. But say it hadn't been flagged to us by an NCALC, and I only saw it because it was listed in this white paper. That it was another one that was a totally separate exercise.
Sorry, go on, Mark.
It does have questions in there.
No, right.
So I've just had a quick look. There's questions in there that it's asking what you think of the policies. So
it's right. It's a very similar structure to this one with as you say, your policies and questions that.
Right.
And I agree with what John did say. They are very much when did you stop beating your wife type questions. They are ones that are structured, that are leading you towards an answer. For example, on the when it talks about raising the ceiling on development sites from the point of view of contributing to affordable housing, or a requirement to have within them affordable housing, that's the difference. It says that the questions are, do you feel it should be raised to 40? Do you feel it should be raised to 50? Do you have another number? Please explain. As I say, it doesn't have, I don't believe it should be raised at all.
Would our response to that we've just discussed, would that response be something that could be suitable for a response to the other document?
It sounds like it's actually distinctly two different things on roughly the same topic. I think we need to see it, don't we? Really, we'll have a look. If Anita circulates that, we'll have a look in the next 2 or 3 days. And I think what we'll do, we're not going to resolve anything on email, but we might just take a flavour as to, is it the right thing to have another extraordinary meeting? Is it something that we can cover off if I get quite cruel about it in an X number of minutes at the September meeting? And or from then we might delegate or 2 or 3 volunteers to pull together the return. But we just need to see what it's asking. Adrian.
So just to recap, Mark sent it out, so we should all have it, if we're not now, in the next few days or whatever. Do you not want us to read that and respond for Anita to pull together ahead of the September meeting, just to speed things up, even if we just bullet point what our thoughts are?
We can, but again, I mean, look, if it's the same shape and size, that could be quite a lot of pulling together. That's all. But
it's marginally small as a document. It's about half the size of this, but it is still a significant document.
If we can look, I mean, it's a good point, Adrian. I mean, if we can just confine that, let's say, to our top 3 points we would wish to make, how's that?
Yeah.
And we feed that back to Anita by 4 days before the meeting. Is that fair? Nobody's mandated to do it, but if you do feel strongly, if you make those 4 points, obviously not 3 pages on each point, but a sentence or 2, then if Anita pulls that together, that's a good idea. We can collate that potentially in the meeting. Well, it'd have to be in the meeting unless we pull an extraordinary one. Okay, thanks, Adrian. That seems to be a good way forward. Anita, is that okay? It's not too onerous, is it?
No, no, that's fine. That's fine.
I think it's a good idea. And then that way we can, I'm sure for a lot of the points will be the same ones. So we can just pull all that together and
Yeah.
summarize it. Okay. Great. Thanks, Adrian. Anything more on item 3?
Good
Look,
discussion, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was important. I know we didn't crisply go through all 25 questions, but as you said, it did lead us somewhere. And I think it was important to talk about it holistically. So thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. Okay, good. So let's just move quickly. I think we'll probably be able to cover off item 4 very quickly. Potential to resume PC meetings at the Village Hall. Brian Leeton's been in touch with me to ask if we wanted to resume the meetings in the Village Hall. He sent a document, kind of how that would be done, or what the policy is. However, the covering note did say, but you'd have to wear a mask for the whole meeting. So I kind of preempted what people's feelings would be, but swore to put it on the agenda for tonight. And I think Mark's going to come in with the coup de grace.
I spoke to the monitoring officer the second I saw this, because I thought the legislation forbid it. The legislation doesn't, but he said you'd have to have a big room because we'd all have to sit 2 meters apart. So you'd need some size of the KBC chamber, so that the room isn't big enough. And you've then got a provision for anyone who wants to come along. And if you get more than, well, in that room, more than 2 or 3, how you can't turn people away from the meeting. You've got to let them participate. So we'd have to then have equipment to do it. So he's saying, don't go, don't do it.
Okay, Peter.
On the looking at as the parish council rep on the Village Hall, yeah, we have put in a whole lot of new measures, sanitising stations and different routing through the building. You come in one way, you go out another way, and those sort of things. So we have done everything that was necessary for a Village Hall to meet the requirements of a community hall. So that has all been done. From the point of view of spacing, we could use the main hall as opposed to the meeting room, so we could maintain the level of spacing if required. However, and I thought the coup de grace that Mark was going to come out with was the fact that the Ministry of Housing and Communities has said that, and local government rather, has said that we should still be meeting remotely wherever possible. That the NCALC briefing of the 21st of February was quoting that and saying that as far as they were stating, not recommending, they were stating that all parish councils should still continue to meet remotely unless there was a major problem why they couldn't. And they suggested if there was a major problem why you couldn't meet remotely, that we should actually bounce it off NCALC to get their input on the specifics. So this seems to work. It works a lot better than it worked initially. So I don't believe that legislation allows us to do it anyway.
Like I said, I like, obviously, it's important that we discuss these things, but again, the idea of wearing masks for 2 to 2.5 hours would impose such a level of discomfort that the little bit that we lose, I feel, doing these meetings remotely and slightly less accessibly, let's say, to those with a poor internet connection or members of the public, I think we would lose a lot more in terms of the personal discomfort of councillors, and I just couldn't sanction it. Sue?
Yeah, perhaps Peter could confirm, because I'd heard through the WI committee that if you do have a meeting in the Village Hall, you have to clean up after yourself, and you're only allowed to use one loo, and every person that uses that loo has to disinfect it before somebody else uses it, which is quite an inconvenience, because our meetings are long anyway without us having cleaning duties on top and before, in my opinion.
Okay, so I think perhaps the message has got slightly Johnny's whispers as it's come out to the members. There is only one toilet that's being used. It's the disabled toilet, and therefore it's one in, one out. There isn't a requirement to totally disinfect the toilet after you've used it. There's only the requirement to clean up and before your event and after your event, any items that you're going to be using. But the kitchens are all closed off. So, and the seating and everything else is being cleaned by Brian. So, and there's a full clean takes place after any one event and before any other event by the caretaker. So it's not quite as draconian as that, but perhaps let's just say that does indicate the level of concerns and the diligence that the caretaker and the committee have put in to make sure that we do meet with the requirements. With respect to face masks, you've got to wear face masks in all common areas, so going to and from rooms. But if you're within one room and you can maintain 2 meters spacing, then you don't have to wear face mask. But if so, that it's the same essentially as anywhere else. The limitation on numbers is roughly a quarter of what it would be under any other circumstances. But it can be used, for example, for the yoga ladies. They could carry on doing theirs if they want, and they can take off their masks when they're doing their yoga, but you've got to maintain the social distancing. So there are and there's in fact there's a hiring agreement. There's a revised hiring agreement that everybody has to sign before they would run the event from there.
Thank you, Peter. I'll need to look back then at what Brian sent me, and I may have read it wrong. I didn't think it's a common areas. Look, the first point I'd like to make, and it's probably clumsy of me, thank you to Brian and the committee, because obviously you've worked hard to try and get that resource reopened, and probably that should have been the first thing we acknowledge. So thank you for that. And I think it means that some groups that do depend on it will at least have that option. So that's good. So it looks like there's 2 issues here. One is the practical side, and the other is the policy side. It sounds to me like we're probably not going to get this resolved ready for a September meeting. It sounds though that the policy side, we are being strongly advised not to do it. Right. Okay. So I think then until we have a need to put this back on the agenda, then we will continue as we are. If I haven't, I'll check. I will circulate because I had to ask Brian for the set of rules, and I think he sent them to me. I'll circulate that just for us to ponder in the background what we would do to make it practical. But I think at the moment we will continue as we are, unless anybody has any strong feelings. But I think I'm sensing that I think we've now got the hang of this, haven't we? And it's I think we'd probably better off convening meetings like this than having additional, say, tasks around spacing and things. Okay. Yeah, I think Terry's just make the point that I think we should resume in the main hall. It would be the wearing of masks that would be determined from what Peter says. We may have to wear them if we maintain meters distance. Okay, it's a good point, Terry. I think what I'll do then, I'll just check to see if I've circulated that second set of guidance from Brian. And it's something then that we might want to consider in due course, but I think it's not going to be for the September meeting. Okay. But again, it's we want to resume when we can. Okay. Right, I think that's that over. So item 5, any other business, folks? No. Again, guys, thanks very much for your attention. Obviously some controversial topics tonight. So thanks again for your attention and all your commitment, and especially for those that read the 84 pages. Thank you very much. Great, thanks, folks. We'll reconvene in a couple of weeks' time. Again, appreciate you taking time out for the extraordinary meetings. Thank you very much.